Hi, I'm Emily from Twin Rocks Outdoor School, and today I am down at the tide pools, and I'm going to show you guys some of the cool things that you can find down here. But first I want to let you know a little bit about what I bring with me when I go down to the tide pools. I always bring a pair of gloves, not because I'm afraid of anything down here. Nothing that's down here is going to bite you or sting you or hurt you. But it's because the barnacles on the rocks can be kind of sharp and I want to protect my fingers. That's why I also wear boots when I go down to the tide pools. Even during the summer, the barnacles on the rocks are really sharp and you don't want to cut your toes by wearing sandals. So boots are always a good idea. I also bring a backpack that has some helpful things in it. Has a first aid kit, just in case. And I bring my trusty ID book, because you never know what you're going to find down here, and that way I can look it up. I also put my cell phone in a waterproof bag, because you don't want to drop your cell phone in the tide pools and then not have all those cool pictures of the things that you found. I also make sure that I check the tides before I go out to make sure that it's low tide, which is the best time for exploring tide pools. And then you always want to keep your eye on the ocean when you're down at the tide pools. All right. Tide pools are a very unique ecosystem because they are they're a space that are sometimes covered in water. So you can see that as the waves come in, it splashes over some of these creatures. But then as the waves go out, they're exposed and they're not underwater. So tide pool creatures have to have a number of adaptations. One of them is an adaptation that allows them to live out of water for a certain period of time. The other is an adaptation that allows them to hold fast to wherever they are so that they're not dragged out to the ocean by the waves. Okay, so we've already found some cool things down here. This rock is covered in all kinds of interesting creatures. So what you're going to see is first some seaweed. This is some rockweed. We also have some green sea lettuce. Lots and lots of creatures eat this, and they also hide amongst it. So it serves a lot of purposes. Then you're going to see these things that look like little white snowballs on the rock, but these are actually green anemones. If the water is over them, they would open up and they're going to have bright pink tips, bright pink tentacles, tipped tentacles. But right now, because the tide is out and they are exposed, they have closed themselves up, and then they cover themselves in little bits of seashell and barnacle shell to protect their soft, squishy outsides. When you are down in the tide pools, it's important not to put your finger right in the center of an anemone because you could harm the anemone by doing that. But touching the sides of them is certainly okay. You can feel how soft they are. Now, if you look right over here with me, we have a giant green anemone. This guy is very big and he's not all the way closed up, so you can see some of those tentacles right there. And as I touch them, he closes up a little bit more and a little bit more to protect itself, thinking that I am potentially a predator. So these little ones are called green aggregate anemones, and this one is a giant green anemone, and I bet you can tell where it gets its name. Also, you'll notice this rock here has some little barnacles all over it. There's some teeny tiny ones, and then some that are getting a little bit bigger, some acorn barnacles. Barnacles are awfully cool little creatures. They start their life as larvae drifting in the ocean. When they find something hard and solid, they attach themselves to it with a really, really strong cement, but they attach themselves head first. So they glue their head down to just about anything: rocks, piers, boats, whales, turtle shells, anything hard that they can find that's relatively slow moving. Glue themselves head down, and then they live their life in that one place. And when the tide comes up, when they're in the water, they have these little feather-like feeding fronds that they stick out, and they catch little bits of food as it drifts by. So this is another type of barnacle here. You can see that this one is quite a bit larger than the surrounding ones. These guys are called thatched barnacles. And they live their life in the same way that the little ones do. They cement themselves head first onto a rock or a hard surface, but they build these really big calcium shells around them to protect themselves. And then if you can see inside, there's also 2 more hard plates that surround the actual barnacle. And when the tide is up, these guys are going to send out their little feather-like feeders that are called cirri, and capture food. Another type of barnacle that you'll find are these ones here called gooseneck barnacles. Now they don't build the casing around them like the acorn barnacles or the thatched barnacles. These guys just have a hard shell kind of outside of their body, but they grow in clumps like this, and when the water is on them, they stick out, looks like they stick out a long neck, and they open up and they stick out their feathered fronds, but they don't build the hard case around them. Down at the tide pools, you want to keep a really close eye on some of the rocks, because you never know what you're going to find in and around them. So I just happened to spot a little bit of orange. I'm going to very carefully turn this rock over. Oh my goodness, and you'll see there's all kinds of things going on down here. So first we have an ochre sea star, this orange colored sea star right here, attached to a rock. I'm not going to pull the sea star off because doing so could injure the sea star, so I'm just going to touch it and observe it from up here. But then I'm also going to look at the underside of this rock right here. We have lots of barnacles. There's a young crab, a young shore crab right here. There's also some egg sacs. Potentially, it looks like probably of a sea slug. And there's some sea anemones and some snails. Here's a periwinkle. Oh, there, our crab is on the move. Lots of small snails under here. So much going on under one rock. And of course, when I'm done, I'm going to put that rock back in the same place that I found it, because that's where those creatures live. Here's another ochre star. These guys come in shades of purple, orange, and then mottled colors between purple and orange, like brownish kinds of colors. So you'll often see these guys at tide pools, one of the most common tide pool sea stars. Oh, and we found one of the hardest creatures of all to find because they look just like a rock. This is called a chitin. And if you can see this creature right here that I'm running my finger over, it has a armor-like body. It's made of these little plates and kind of a soft, hairy outside. So I think this would be a hairy chitin. Very slow-moving creatures. And again, they look very similar to the rock, so they are hard to spot. So most of the crabs that you find down here at the tide pools are going to be small shore crabs. They'll be purple, green, brown, black. They'll have stripes and spots. But this one, oh, so here's a purple shore crab. Let me pull that guy out for you. So that's a purple shore crab. But you can see this larger one right here. This one is actually a rock crab, and I can tell by the black tips on the ends of its claws. That's a pretty fun find. So I found another cool thing. This is the molted shell exoskeleton of a Dungeness crab. As crabs grow, they have to molt their shell, just like snakes molt their skin as they grow. And I can tell that this one is a molt because I can open it up. And when you open it up, it reveals that there's nothing inside of it, just the leftover shell. This is a Dungeness crab. This one probably washed into the tide pools here. These guys usually live deeper out in the bay or the ocean. And I can tell that this crab is a female. And that's because of this section right here on the crab. A male would have a very narrow undersection, but the female is larger and curved like this. Another type of crab that you're going to find down here at the tide pools a lot is the hermit crab. Now at first you might think it's a snail because hermit crabs live inside and take shelter inside snail shells, but when you turn it over, you'll see that little pincher there That's the telltale sign that there's something else living inside that snail shell. Ooh, so we have here a kelp crab. And you can tell these guys by the shape of their shell, which is quite different from some of our other types of crabs like Dungeness and shore crabs. They have kind of this greenish brownish color, perfect for blending in with the kelp. So I'm gonna let this guy go back. So right here we have found a type of fish called a gunnel. Now it looks a lot like an eel and it swims a lot like an eel, but this is actually a fish, and this fish has a pretty cool adaptation that it can live partially out of the water for a very long time, which makes it an ideal intertidal zone creature, needing to live where sometimes it does not have much water. These guys are also sometimes called slippery fish because they are so very hard to catch. They're very slippery. Woo! But here we go. So this is a gunnel. And I'm gonna put him back in the water now. There you go, buddy. We've found a really cool creature, one of my favorite to find in the tide pools. This is a type of sea slug called a nudibranch. And this particular type is a shaggy mouse nudibranch. Now you'll see a couple of them moving around in here. Nudibranchs are so cool because they are one of the most colorful sea creatures that we have in our local tide pools. There's lots and lots of species of them. They can range from bright orange, bright pink, bright blue to very drab colors like brown, whites, and creams. But they are a type of sea slug, so they move around similar to the slugs that you see on land. They have one long body. Some of them are vegetarians, but some of them are carnivorous, and they will eat other small prey items. These, you'll see, are eating anemones. There aren't many species that actually eat anemones. Some sea stars do, but these nudibranchs are one of the species that eat them. So we're seeing the food chain in action here in the tide pools. So in this pocket, we found two types of echinoderms. One is this purple sea urchin right here, and the other is this purple sea star. Now the sea urchin and the sea star are related because they both have spines. So echinoderm means spiny skinned. The sea star has small spines on the top and some slightly larger but still relatively small spines on the underside where its tube feet are. But the sea urchin's whole rounded body is covered in longer spines. They're also related to a couple other creatures like sea cucumbers and sand dollars. Well, thank you for exploring the tide pools with us. I hope you enjoyed this tide pool excursion. Please remember that next time you get the chance to go to the tide pools, these are incredibly interesting and diverse ecosystems, but they're also very fragile. So don't take anything out of the tide pools other than pictures and memories. Be careful as you tread around these areas. Have a great day. We'll see you later.